How are we all doing? Got a cup of Kenyan tea here, and I felt like it would be the appropriate time to discuss the great Kenyan runner Eliud Kipchoge. Now, he's just recently broken the marathon world record at the Berlin Marathon. However, he has ran faster than that in previous marathons when he broke the sub 2 hour barrier in the marathon as well. Fantastic documentaries out there about this that you can watch, explaining the kind of training he went through, the mindset of the athletes, and really interesting to actually see how Eliud actually lives his life as well. Very humble man, very simple way of life, almost like a monk. There are many that describe him as a bit of a monk, and not only in the way that he lives his day-to-day life, but in the way that he runs as well. So, Kenyan tea, let's start with the tea and maybe a little bit about nutrition. So there are lots of mixed ideas about what the Kenyans eat, but generally it all follows the same sort of principles, which is a high carbohydrate, low fat, low protein, and I say low in comparison to the standard recommendations that you'll find in the nutritional world. So usually they're around about 80 to 90% of their calories are coming from carbohydrates, much of which comes from simple high carbohydrates, actually white sugar. Okay, and I'll explain why this is in a moment. So the remainder of their calories comes from fats and proteins, which are generally beans, legumes, occasionally a small amount of meat, eggs, and nuts, seeds, things like that. You know, pretty standard kind of foods that you'd find in the blue zones around the world where people live the longest lives. And it's very obvious why this is. This diet is the optimal diet for the human biology. You know, there's lots of different opinions online about nutrition and diets. I'm not going to get into the weeds about this just now. I really want to stay focused on Eliud and his lifestyle. But essentially, they eat a lot of basically corn. So it's corn maize flour, which is made into this ugali they call it. And they eat bread. He'll often eat bread. He actually eats porridge, oatmeal in the morning for his breakfast. You'll have oatmeal, banana and honey before training or before races, and it's a very simple diet. It's very simple: oats, ugali, lots and lots of black Kenyan tea with lots of sugar, lots of white sugar, and of course when he's racing and when he's doing his training, he's also consuming sugar in the forms of glucose, sucrose and fructose. Basically, if you look at the Morton is the company that sponsors him, that's the gels that have been optimized for performance. And essentially what they're doing is they're keeping the glycogen levels topped up. So quickly about sugar, why do they consume so much sugar? Well, first of all, it does taste pretty nice. Sweet tea is quite nice. However, it's primarily because it would be incredibly difficult for these athletes to get the appropriate amounts of calories through eating a whole food diet. If they were just to eat the whole foods, especially in a place like Kenya where the food is all sourced locally, it's all organic, it's high nutrient density for that reason, and it's not like in the UK or in most Western places where you can just go to the supermarket and you can buy all this factory farmed industrial processed crap, which really has no nutritional values but high calories. That type of diet would not, I would argue, would not be able to sustain the amount of training that the Kenyans do and allow them to recover in such a way that they can maximize their potential to the point as to where Kipchoge has reached this unbelievable potential. They've done studies on the man. They've attached sensors to him and looked at his athletic performance when running at paces that are just unbelievable. To put this into context, because a lot of people think, oh, he runs a 2 hour marathon, that's amazing. To put this into context in which most people would understand, for anybody out there who runs a 5K or a park run, okay, he is running 8 consecutive 5Ks in less than 15 minutes, okay? He is running consecutively sub 15-minute 5Ks 8 times in a row without stopping. How is he doing that? Because he has maximised his training and recovery to such a point, and yes, there is a genetic predisposition as well, but to such a point that he can do this. And this is actually one of the reasons why such a high amount of calories in the form of carbohydrates and sugar ensures that the muscle glycogen and liver glycogen is fully stored up so that they can produce the amount of energy required for the training sessions and then recover, because this stuff actually goes back, replenishes the glycogen stores and allows nutrients to be assimilated and the body to recover in the appropriate way. Not even to mention the hormonal fluctuations that can happen when we become deprived of the body's primary fuel source, which is sugar, which is glucose. Okay, we are glucose machines as humans. So the keto people out there will tell you otherwise, and all I can say is yes, there are benefits to fat adaptation. However, why does Kipchoge not bother with this fat adaptation? Because once you exceed a certain point in your training, or your mileage is above a certain point, and I'm going to throw a figure of about 10 to 12 hours of aerobic volume, so that's running, cycling, swimming, walking, hiking, some kind of exercise. Once you hit that point, the fat adaptation occurs regardless of whether you're consuming high amounts of carbohydrates or not, okay? So yes, there is something to be said about fat adaptation. Yes, there is something to be said about being metabolically flexible, but let's face it, show me an athlete who is ketogenic and stays ketogenic throughout races at a really high level. I'm not asking them to do a sub-2 hour marathon, I'm just asking them to show me somebody like, for example, Zach Bitter, fantastic athlete, however, he is consuming carbohydrates during his events, okay? There's other examples out there as well. So that's that out of the way. And make sure you brush your teeth after you've had your sugar, but it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world if you are training at a high level. If you're burning those calories off, if you're burning that sugar and you're using it up, then it's okay, you know? So that's the reason why they drink so much of this tea, is to make sure they can get that in. It's liquid calories. Sports drinks do the same thing. You know, you could literally just drink sugar water, it would do the same thing. Now, the rest of their diet is whole foods, plant-based predominantly, which allows them to recover properly with the appropriate amounts of antioxidants and nutrients and vitamins and minerals to actually fuel and recover and rebuild the cells of the body, with a minimal focus on protein. As long as they're getting a complete amino acid profile, which they will be for eating a natural whole foods plant-based diet, and some protein, they're not overly concerned that they're going to have any problems there. Okay, let's move on to his lifestyle now, because the nutrition is a huge part of this, but the lifestyle, I would argue, is of equal importance, if not perhaps even more so. Because when we talk about lifestyle, we can also talk about the way in which we consume food. And this is a really interesting subject with a lot of new data coming out now, that if you consume your food in a way, in a heightened state of stress, or in a stressful situation, or the food is not cooked with the appropriate amount of care and love put into it, the nutrient quality of that food becomes much, much less important, because your assimilation of the nutrients is diminished somewhat significantly. So if you look at the way that Kipchoge lives, very simple life, he's a very happy man, he's always smiling, he doesn't need much. The man is probably a multi-millionaire, I would imagine. If you look at the way he lives, you would never think this. He is just a very humble, hard-working, living person, and really I think modern society could learn a lot from this kind of person. I'm not saying that you have to go and become a monk or become a person like Eliud Kipchoge who lives a very simple life, but we could definitely take a step back and, you know, start to find true happiness within, rather than trying to seek it externally all the time. And yeah, he just says that he loves running, he loves movement, he loves fitness and health, he loves the camaraderie of teamwork, and they're very happy people. They're very happy, and I think that is key. If you're not happy but you're out there grinding every day, that can be beneficial to a certain point, but eventually you're going to plateau and have problems there. Okay, so moving on to the way his approach when he's actually running. If you look at him running, he is incredibly focused but incredibly relaxed. He's incredibly relaxed. He is not breathing very hard. There's a lot of nasal breathing, which also has many health benefits on its own, which I've spoken about before. Most people would not be able to nasal breathe at this pace, but he is able to do so due to such a high level of fitness, but also such a relaxed state. Because he's relaxed, he's using less energy. His technique is much more efficient. And because of this, he can sustain incredibly fast paces without using a lot of energy at all. Now, he talks about the way his mind is during a race. Thoughts come into his mind, but he lets them go. He's meditating through his races. He is meditating through his marathons because a thought will come in. For example, many runners out here listening to this will have thoughts come in which are such thoughts like, oh, my training hasn't been that well. Oh, I've got this niggle going on, or I had this injury earlier in the year, so I had a few weeks off, or oh, my taper hasn't been perfect, or I woke up too early this morning or didn't get to sleep last night. All these thoughts will come in and doubt starts to creep within the mind, which in turn then tells you to, it's okay. If you've got a goal, for example, say you've got a goal, let's translate it into a 5K PB at your local park run. And you head out there, you do your warm up, you're feeling okay, and you head out, and it's hard. A park run, a 5K is hard at a maximum effort, even if you're not running as fast as Kipchoge. It's very difficult. And doubt will start to creep in. You maybe get passed by somebody, maybe say for example, you set off at the front, or you set off pretty fast and somebody passes you, and somebody else passes you, and you start to think, oh, my legs are not feeling that great, something's not right. Oh, I done a strength workout on Thursday and now I've not recovered. All these things start to creep into your mind. What Kipchoge does here is very smart, and this is something that I use as well, is he will just let that thought pass like a cloud. It will just pass out of his mind very quickly. And I do a similar thing where I'm not quite as monk-like as Kipchoge. I can't just allow it to pass like a cloud. I have to take my focus elsewhere. So I take my focus inwards into my breathing, or I take my focus into my feet, into my footsteps. A really good technique I like to use is the 10-step count, which I will just count 10 steps. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, I'm just counting, and I'll just go back to step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what I will do over and over is I will try, especially if this is towards the end of a race, if this is, say, the last mile of a 5K, or the last kilometre of a 5 kilometre, maybe even better, I would then try and make sure that speed of my counting is getting faster. So if my cadence is starting to slow down, I'll be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And trying to go faster and faster and faster. And it takes the mind away from these negative thoughts and into something which is real, which is happening in the present moment. Again, focusing on the breath can really help, because you can actually calm your breathing down, which in turn reduces the level of energy you're expending. Focusing on your technique, focusing on visual points is a really good one as well. So taking your mind out of your head and into, I'm going to get to this lamppost. I'm not going to slow down until I get to this corner. I'm not going to slow down. I'm going to go as hard as I can up this hill, and then I'll recover on the downhill. And you can trick your mind this way as well. Okay, so going back to Kipchoge for a second, this is something he does for 2 hours on his marathons, and he does it in such, if you watch him run, he does it in such a profound way, and he often smiles. It's another really key takeaway, is that he smiles as he's running. So if you ever try this, if you're really hurting during a race and you smile, you will notice your pain will dissipate. The body will send a signal to say this is okay, we're fine, this is okay. And yeah, that's the real key takeaways I would say from Kipchoge. How can we translate that into our own running? You know, well, we can live a more simple life, de-stress, which really helps with recovery. We can drink Kenyan tea, not be afraid of sugar too much, especially if you're doing a lot of training. You know, we have to make sure we're keeping the calories coming in order to fuel ourselves and also recover. And yeah, having that mindset where you're not so focused on the negative things coming in, but also not so focused on the result, just being in the process is really key. So hope you enjoyed that video. Hopefully it's given you some key takeaways there from Kipchoge's running. And he's just a great, fantastic guy. Like I say, I recommend having a look at some of the other videos on YouTube or the documentaries. I think Nike done a documentary with National Geographic, which is very good. And you know, put these tips from the world's best into your own practices. And if you liked the video, please comment below. Please let me know if there are any other elite runners. I've got a couple in my mind that I'm thinking about doing other videos with insights and key takeaways on their training, lifestyle and nutrition, so that we, at our level, individual level, whatever level we're at, whether it be beginner, intermediate, advanced, 5k, 10k, marathon runner, ultra marathon runner, even cyclists, triathletes, anybody can use this information, and we can put this stuff into practice in our own lives to allow us to reach our potential, because no human is limited.